KEF Connect. Conversations that matter. Tune in every week for interviews with industry trendsetters and community changemakers that will instill inspiration and ignite action. Visit www.kefholdings.com and click KEF Connect to listen.
All right, everyone, welcome to Season 5 of KEF Connect. KEF Connect is a podcast by KEF Holding, and in every episode, we hope to have trailblazers like you guys upon to discuss various topics, all with the idea to inspire action. Now, the topic of today's discussion is all about use and misuse of data. I'm Shereen Abdulla. I help create content with companies out of my studio, Spark Studios. I produce and host multiple podcasts, and I'm very happy to be here with you all today. But today's not about me, it's about you all and how your expertise can be brought on the table and shared with our audience all around the field of data. So I'm going to ask you all to say hello to the audience and introduce yourselves. Roxane, why don't we start with you? So for everyone tuning in, Roxane is the Executive Business Director of PhD Media. Over to you.
Thank you, Shereen. So they call me Roxy or Rox. And my company is responsible for doing omni-channel media planning and buying for our set of clients in the fields of automotive, retail, fashion, pharmaceutical, and other industries. So we do a lot of performance marketing, and we do a lot of data-driven targeting as well.
Super. Roxy, I'm going to be calling you that for the rest of the show.
Sure.
Thanks for that. Thomas, why don't we move over to you? And for everyone tuning in, Thomas is the marketing manager for Letswork.
Thank you for that introduction. So I've been with Letswork. So to begin with, Letswork is a mobile platform that helps you connect with workspaces across the UAE. So you can find shared workspaces in hotels, meeting rooms, or private offices all across the UAE, and you can book through a single application. And I've joined Letswork like 2 years ago when it started, and I've seen the community grow from 6,000 members to 26,000 members, and growing the community to such a huge scale, and also working with personal data of members. I've had the pleasure of growing that community bigger and also making sure that all the data remains private and also remains safe, because that's the biggest concern. And through our application, we do track a lot of data, which is personal data, which is behavioral data, engagement data. I'm more than happy to share my experience on how we do and what sort of data that we collect, so that you guys feel safe, that we're not using it to sell it to someone else, but we're using it to better enhance your experience on our platform.
Hopefully. I go to lots of coffee shops and see Letswork coffee mugs everywhere. So let's hope you're using your data to help me get a spot in one of my favorite coffee shops.
Yes, exactly. That's what we do.
Super. Thomas, thank you for that introduction. Andrew, over to you. And to everyone tuning in, Andrew is the Managing Director of Digital Media over at Digital Nexa.
Yeah, hey there. How's it going? Hey, guys. So Nexa is a digital growth agency. Been here for 16 years, so started in 2005, offices here in UK and US as well. I guess our whole life is data. So, from a client perspective, making sure that we target the right individuals for the right messaging. And a lot of that has to do with, obviously, data. So there isn't a day that goes by where there isn't a conversation about how we interact with individuals. Happy to jump on and looking forward to a kind of discussion around data, as it were.
Nice to meet you, Andrew.
Nice to meet you.
So it seems like everyone is working with personal data. So all of you in some way, shape, or form are targeting individuals. Why don't we start by discussing what is personal data and how does it differ from non-personal data? Anyone can answer that question to kick things off.
Personal data in the scope of digital advertising is any data that can identify a specific individual, right? Like, for example, PII, we call it PII as, let's say, my name, my contact number, my email address, my resident address. So anything that can identify me as a person. So in advertising, we don't really handle PII because that's not legal. So we call it audience pool. So we, let's say, access Facebook or Google. They have different audience platforms. We target people by their interests, behaviors, let's say location. So anything that is anonymous because it's cookie based. Now in the future, well, it's been postponed now, but in 2023, we're going to live in a cookie-less society. So that's another digital transformation that we all have to navigate as marketeers. But not now, in the future. So PII is a personal data that is, let's say, from the likes of, let's say, Thomas. They will have access to that because it's their first-party data. But from a media agency, for example, in our case, we use third-party or second-party data, something that has been anonymized by the platform already.
So if in some respects consumers' data are anonymized, why is everyone freaking out about their data being shared? What's so, let's say, restrictive about the type of data that your company is working with?
I think it's a matter of the company's integrity as well, because there are certain security holes, there are certain data breaches that all of us have to be, aware of. And in our company, we have very strict, protocols on security. And, even with our set of clients, we will always have to remind them to give us an encrypted data or a hash data, and we cannot touch any PII data. So it is something of I think it's a personal responsibility of people who work on the field of marketing, and at the same time a corporate responsibility as well.
Do you guys and all your companies provide training for your staff members for them to understand, hey, if PII data lands on your lap, reject it, abort mission?
Again, no, it depends. So I think for myself and Thomas, we handle that data. So, we kind of slightly different, and I'll talk about my environment. But data for me is what people are willing to share. So when we're dealing with, for example, European countries, GDPR, that's very strict as far as how you use that data. Even if you give permission for your data to be used, it's very strict on how it is. It's a bit, let's say, more loose in this part of the world. There are new laws that are coming in to protect individuals and the data they share, but at the end of the day, it's what people are willing to share. I think the challenge really is, people are freaking out, but people don't read, I agree. So anytime you go to a website, we've all signed the consent form, but no one's ever read it, right? So
I was just about to ask, are people aware of what it is that they agree to share?
I think at most of the time, no. I think what may have sparked some kind of wider interest. So we know we're in the industry, but a wider interest may be, with the new privacy laws in Apple phones specifically, you're getting asked now, hey, listen, I want to track your usage across multiple apps. Do you want to do that?
I've noticed that.
Exactly.
What do you click? Track or not track?
No, never track.
What about you, Thomas?
So it depends. So if it's something that I see,
it's an app you like.
It's an app I like.
Like it's your app.
Yeah, if it's my app.
No, I click your app. Don't worry, I click your app.
Yeah, but if it's something like, for example, I see that you're wearing a Whoop band, and if it's something that actually gives me data that it's used for something more productive, and I know that the company is quite safe, I would of course allow them, but. You can also, like you said, there are many layers as well. You can choose what data, because now with the new privacy laws as well, and this is something that has affected us, especially with Apple's new policy. We had to sort of give reasons to every single thing that why we are tracking it. For example, if you're tracking engagement behavior, how many people are clicking on a button on a homepage, we needed to give that specific reason, because Apple rejected the fact when we gave them a vague answer to it. So they rejected the update and they told us, hey, no, you need to give us a specific reason for exactly why you're tracking it, and that exact same reason is communicated to you. So now I think companies like Apple are getting better, but I'm not sure how it is now on the Android phones, because that's a completely different, I would say, operating system.
So you make an interesting point. Andrew, you mentioned something along the lines of the data privacy laws in the Middle East are looser than, let's say, GDPR rules in the EU. Given that you're all business people operating in the UAE, how do you go about making sure that you uphold a particular standard? And what is that standard? Is it a Middle Eastern standard or standards enforced by European companies like Apple, let's say?
We tend to more in line with GDPR.
Yeah,
we
it's modeled,
we
it's
modeled
around
on that.
GDPR.
You know, for companies that have any kind of level of integrity, that's kind of where it is. And I think also a lot of the platforms that we will use have their own kind of data privacy standards. You know, so for example, if there's a list going around of individuals, you know, that a client wants to use, it gets flagged straight away. You know, these things get flagged. So I think it's, you know, yes, a personal responsibility and obviously a company responsibility, but also sometimes, you know, these platforms, I mean, everything is on the cloud right now. So you know, there is data out there. I think the challenge really is that people are just blissfully unaware. You know, so because everything is a free model, right? So if we look at consumers, every single kind of app really on my phone is free. Instagram, TikTok, right? Snap, you know, Facebook, Twitter.
I pay for Spotify Premium.
yeah, you pay for Spotify, but all of the other apps, there's that exchange, right?
Yeah.
So
nothing's for free.
Exactly. If I want to get on
exchange.
TikTok, you know, why are they letting you use the application for free? Why are they giving you these incredible tools to create exchange of your data?
Yeah.
And when you actually, so if I think the biggest, if you want to know where your data is being used, open up the privacy policy that they have and read through. And they, even in our privacy policy, we mention saying, yeah, this data is used. This data can be shared with our subcontractors who might help build the company. And if you've got, like you said, if you're a company that has a good integrity, then you would make sure that, you know, this data is only used for these purposes and not for anything else. And that's, I think, what users need to do if they want to know where their data is being used.
So on that note, how do companies actually track your data? What is the tech behind tracking your data? Roxy, I think you mentioned cookies earlier. Now, for the longest time, 10 years ago, I thought cookies were cookies, and I was so confused about what they were. Do they have something to do with tracking data, or is there a different mechanism that goes on?
There's a technology, actually, that a lot of companies and, you know, the bigger ones, they have a DMP, or a data management platform, that actually aggregates all the sources of data, all data from different sources, like first party, which what we've discussed, second party data, third party data. So all of this comes into like a platform, and then it can be anonymized, and it will be, you know, classified into different audience buckets. You know, like we can build personas about it, whether you are, let's say, a traveler, or you're, let's say, a progressive leader, you know, or a progressive parent. So we can, you know, classify them into intent, interest, behavior. So it's all about the user journey online. So it's all about attribution as well.
Is there any good that can come out of giving data to a company?
Yes, so that we can, you know, we can analyze different consumer behaviors and habits as well. Because without us knowing our consumers, we won't be able to improve our products, right? The more consumer signals, the more data points that we have, it goes into a machine learning algorithm that will help, let's say, e-commerce companies, or let's say, you know, even brick and mortar companies, you know, that have, let's say, a social platform. They know the sentiments. It's not a bad thing, I would say. We shouldn't be scared of, you know, companies, especially legitimate companies collecting data. I would say that from a personal perspective, take the time. You're right. People don't read. They just like accept. So remember that companies are more responsible now. There's always an opt-in policy.
True.
Right? So, and you would notice how responsible the companies are, to Thomas' point, is that if they will tell you, let's say, the first time you visit a website, it prompts, and it says, accept cookies, manage cookies. Some companies are more sophisticated. When you click manage cookies, it gives you options. Whereas some goes into the simpler way of allow and deny.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
So, and for me on mobile, because I use both Android and iPhone, so you can also compare how the security protocols are in place. Some are saying to you, do you allow tracking, always on tracking, track while using the app, or never?
That's the one I always use, track while using app.
Exactly.
Because I think it's a happy medium, you know?
Yeah.
Like I want the recommendations, but I don't want you to spy on me.
But not all the time, you know?
Exactly.
Because I'm obsessed with user journey.
Okay.
Like if you go to my, if you see my browsing history, it's very complex because I'm a mom. So you can go to my YouTube and you can see, you know, kids
Baby Shark
and
videos.
fashion
Baby
videos.
Shark. Cocomelon.
So it's very different. Even let's say, your e-commerce, right? What if I put something, I forgot to buy it, I'll be sent a reminder, because it's what we call retargeting, right? So it has a lot of upsides as well.
True.
I think the only flip on that is that, the discussion at the moment, like a wider discussion. So if we kind of remove our, business hats and look at it from a consumer perspective, it is, the danger of an echo chamber, right? So if you're constantly being recommended things that you love or you think you love, there's a danger of never discovering anything new, right? And some of that's coming out with things like DuckDuckGo. So that's a search engine now that doesn't track anything, right? So even Google, your Google results are going to differ, right? Around this table, our Google results are going to differ even from the mobile to the desktop. So that's why people are looking at things like DuckDuckGo, and people are kind of taking their privacy a bit more, and you saw that a lot in the kind of the elections in the US, right? People were kind of like, I don't understand why you have this viewpoint. Well, the fact is you've only seen one viewpoint because the algorithms and all the ads are triggered for you to engage with them, right? Either be passionate, right? Either way, be super angry about it or super sad or whatever, right? That's what they want. They want that. Look, don't get me wrong. I love the fact that I get targeted on Amazon and it goes, hey, listen, you've just bought this meat thermometer. You should probably buy this Coles. And like, oh, yeah, I definitely want that, right? I love that.
You're barbecuing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm barbecuing. But I love that. But and I'm happy with that trade-off, right? I think you're either happy with that trade-off or you're not, right? And that's very much a personal decision.
But that's why never allow anyone to use your online, whether it's OTT or Netflix or your mobile, because it changes your browsing history.
So that's actually why I don't use Netflix.
Exactly. Netflix,
Please don't touch my viewing habits.
Once upon a time, my mom went on my Netflix, and all I get now are period dramas. And I just don't go on Netflix anymore.
That's when you make the different profiles if you're sharing. But I think it's a healthy mix. Like for me, I find it annoying that, every time I search something and then you don't know what I want, it's sort of annoying because it's just like, okay, now I need to restart from the beginning. But I think it's a healthy mix between the company helping you provide you personalized services to, sometimes, okay, just let me explore. Let me see what's out there, and I think that's where the balance is. And of course, you've got, I think, with users as well, I think you've got two extremes as well. There's one type of user where he's like, no, I don't want you to track anything of mine, and then there's the other one who's happy with it. So you always have extremes and someone who's always there in between. So I think companies need to also give options for all kinds of users in the world, especially, and for the ones that are extreme, saying no, you got to respect, because that's their right, that's their data. So especially what we do is we have in our privacy policy saying, hey, if you don't want us using your data, then email us, and then we'll make sure that you're being left out with everything else. But we also give a warning saying that, okay, if that happens, then you will be able not to use a lot of the services, because some of them might be location based and the others might be, based on your preferences. Exactly.
FOMO.
Yeah, FOMO.
So let's say in an ideal world, all consumers believe that companies are out to recommend things to their best interest, so they give their data. But let's be real. Often hackers go and hack these big corporations to access the PII data or any other data that they have. So in the case of a breach, what should a company do to protect the consumer data that they have on file?
It really depends on how big is the liability and the damage. Because first, we need to assess what kind of data they're storing, right? Are these credit card numbers, or is it names? What is the gravity of the damage and the impact? And second is, what is their liability to the law?
So let's say code red, credit cards have been stolen, passport copies. What does a company do?
Yeah, of course, all companies have their own, protocol or program on that, and it depends on who gets involved, right? So let's say it happened to me in the past, and I was a victim of a credit card hack. So I'm not going to name the company, but I was sleeping at 3 a.m. and somebody's transacting on my behalf in Germany. Right. So I was like, okay, it's a good thing I got a call from the bank, but then the transaction happened. So
did they give you a refund?
So here's the thing. What happened was, it was not just my credit card. It's also my account.
Oh.
So then you see the gravity that it is a major hack, right? And so the call center person told me, normally they would say, go to the bank, fill up a form, we'll investigate, we'll see. In 45 days, we'll let you know. So I'm like, it's gonna take 45 days. But that one, I knew it was serious because they said, come to our building. When I got there, there's a lot of people. They made me sign something and they said, we'll give back everything in 7 days.
Oh, wow. Good on the bank.
Okay. So now I know what happened, but I'm happy to get my money back in 7 days. And they did.
So let's pick then on what happened.
So it's not an isolated case that it's just me.
Oh, it's happened to me as well
it's a
before, yeah.
company-wide.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the interesting point there is that we don't know about that. So there's been some serious data breaches regionally that you find out like 8 months later.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and it's not, let's say, for example, a ride-sharing app, right? That kind of data isn't just, for example, look at it at a wider piece. It's not just your name, your credit card. It's got data on potentially your home, your kid's school, right? Different locations that you go to. Yeah, so I think also it depends on like that level of hack of what it is, and a lot of the time, it's credit card fraud and things like that, and it ends up somewhere else. But I think usually organisations, first and foremost, they actually stay quiet about it because they're trying to fix it and resolve it. Right, it's not going to help anyone to create any kind of panic. Right, and you see in the US, obviously a lot by law they have to kind of legally say, hey, listen, we got, and it happens, to I mean. Zuckerberg got hacked, right? I mean, the Twitter gets hacked. I mean, it happens, and I think the thing is that usually it's for malicious activity or it could be comical even in some crazy places. But really, as an organization, there's only there's a level of responsibility, obviously, but also it's just, like you said, handling that situation. That's usually what the case is. And in this case, none of us have heard of that, right?
Yeah.
Have we heard of a bank getting hacked here? No, I haven't, right? So, but it happened, So it's kind of, and they've handled it well. They've kind of, and people trust, and you're probably still with that bank because they handled the situation. So a lot of that has to do with that.
But here's the thing. I mean, you've said it absolutely right in the sense that you will not hear it when it's still happening.
No.
You will hear it once it's solved because the company has to disclose it to the public. So that's why there is a certain liability that the company needs to disclose, right, to the public on like, for example, in automotive there is a part that is defective. So an automotive company has to issue an ad. It's called a recall ad, announcing it publicly to a national newspaper, in Arabic and English, to inform everyone that if you're owning this certain vehicle type, come to us and we will fix it to you for free because there's a defect. It's called a recall. So again, here you can see that because automotive is a well-regulated industry, it's black or white. People know exactly what they need to do.
At least at the time of recording of this episode, yesterday Aramco announced a data breach, and the hackers were asking for a $50 million ransom in Bitcoin, by the way, but that's a separate topic, which kind of makes me wonder, Aramco is not a consumer-facing company. What kind of, let's say, non-consumer related data can some companies out there have that could be attractive for hackers to get a hold of?
I think for something like Aramco, you've got to look at the individuals inside Aramco. It just so happens that Aramco, obviously there's ministers that are there. There's very high net worth individuals that still operate inside Aramco.
And their emails.
And all of the data associated to that. So, there could be sensitive data because I think a hack also could not just be name, telephone number. It could be exactly projects. It could be awards. It could be a whole host of things.
And Aramco is one of the largest companies in the world right now.
True.
So they've got all kinds of like data that even their communication with like maybe governments, for example, because they sell oil to other governments, transactions.
Do you think that in some, let's say, hacking instances, the motivation could be something of like a political agenda, let's say?
There's a whole host of that. Yeah.
I think that could dive
That's like
into
a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
Whole other podcast.
We can digress.
I mean, the dark web is, and sometimes it's more of like a challenge, right? If you're a hacker, you push yourself to do something that's never been done, right? So there's a lot of motives and different interests.
Could various governing bodies in the UAE do more to help protect the consumer's data, like what the EU has done with GDPR, for example?
I think possibly. I think one of the things that we need to consider in this part of the world is, which is quite unique, is we are legally have to give over a lot of personal information. So in my wallet and now on an app, fingerprints, blood type, right? Everything associated to Emirates ID. And that's just natural for us, right? Because that's part of living in this part of the world, right? Across the Middle East, it's kind of like you live here, blood, fingerprints, right? Even this bit, which I don't understand, which is like a judo chop. I don't know. Like, why do they want that? But like, you know, so we freely give up that information. So I found that in this part of the world, people are kind of more open to giving up that information. Now, what I think is incredible at the moment at a government level, you know, they hold an insane amount of data on all of us now, and when we're dealing with kind of governments as well, and regional governments, there's a lot of there's a lot being done, right? And it's not public, but there's a lot being done. So, you know, data, for example, is only stored in country. So there will be no kind of, even though it may be cloud-based, you know, Microsoft, for example, have a data storage center here.
It's a local
Amazon,
cloud.
yeah, exactly. So it's local, like in country. So I think they're doing a phenomenal job, really, and kind of Dubai Economic Department, the consumer rights. I think anything like that, if your data, you know, is shared or there's a breach. Plus, as well, it's a criminal act here. So you know, if we took a picture of, you know, like your passport or put it up publicly or wanted to sell it, it's a criminal act like that. So I think we're
I would assume it's a criminal act everywhere.
Yeah,
no?
but it's but here, you know, they're very responsive to those kind of things. I think if we're sitting in the US or we're sitting in the UK, he put my picture up on Facebook, and what do you want me to do? Like, you know, whereas here you know, they'll send someone around your house, right? I mean, it's kind of, I think it's just, they're very proactive here. They're very protective, and I think that must be because ultimately they're the custodian of some phenomenal data. I mean, when the Emirates ID first came in, we were working with some financial institutions, and it was very cool. They were talking about, you know, linking your Emirates ID to you know, banking and being able to get a loan on the spot because of, you know, you've got this centralized location of all your data. And at that point, there was kind of chargeable access to that, which was quite interesting. But I think that, honestly, for my money, they're doing a solid job. I mean, it's difficult to... Right.
So Andrew, you mentioned that you freely give data here in the UAE.
Yeah.
I'm curious, is there such a thing as data privacy anymore?
So to come around to that topic, actually, I was just going to add on to what Andrew was saying. I think, I mean, the governing bodies all across the world are trying to, you know, of course, like make it better and, you know, better for the consumer. But also, I think ultimately, all bodies should realize that, like, the data that we're collecting is it is owned by the consumer. It's owned by me or you, who's actually, you know, so even like the Emirates ID, like the fingerprints, the blood type. So I think there should also be a responsibility or the fact that, like, at the end of the day, if that person wants to get that data back, it's his property, so he should be able to get it back. And I think that's the world where we need to come to, where that piece of information that they've taken from us they need to give it back to us, knowing that it is, well, our property. And I don't think we've reached that sort of a stage yet.
No.
And not globally.
I think even globally, I mean,
Like,
we know that GDPR is the strongest you know, out there, and a lot of countries are modeling their data privacy around GDPR. In the UAE, although we don't have like GDPR that's like a central law, but I've actually researched about it. Like, you know, it sits on different places. Like, there's the penal code, there is a law around medical practitioners about, you know, patient records, which I'm actually very impressed that they have that. There's also the cybercrime law, you know, there's law about defamation. Like, if, let's say, I took a picture of all of us, I posted it on my Facebook, I didn't get your permission, then I could get into trouble, right? So I think, you know, I mean, that's why I guess people feel safe in disclosing a lot of things here because they know that the government is really responsible, that you feel protected. So to answer your question on is there such thing as data privacy, I think there is. It's just that people has to be more knowledgeable on how to opt in, opt out, what are the boundaries as well, what are the risks. So those things, even our app now on, let's say on iPhone, there is a place called security, and it will show you all the apps that's in there where you put some PII data, and then it will show you some of these are at risk, and it will recommend you to change your passwords right away. So you have that on your mobile. So the consumers are in control, but it's also our responsibility to learn more about,
That's a very good tip. I'm going to go do that the minute this
even when
podcast
you-
is
So
over.
you're right, that's a note.
Yeah, I actually changed my passwords.
Even when you actually, so this is a tip I actually give to all of my friends. Even when you sign up on apps, and if you have an Apple device, always sign in with Apple. Because when you sign in with Apple, I don't get your email address, your number, or nothing from the company point of view. What I get, and this is where you can choose. You can say, I think Apple gives you a prompt saying, hey, do you want to give your email address or do you want to keep it hidden? And what we see is a dummy email made by Apple, and every communication that we have to send to the consumer is sent to a dummy email to Apple, and Apple forwards that email to you.
What about all those Android users out there?
So that's where
Get an Apple phone.
they don't have it.
Buy an Apple, buy an iPhone.
It's an open
That's Thomas's advice. Buy an
Actually,
iPhone.
on that note,
Because I mean, if you've noticed, like Apple's biggest, I think, with the new iOS update, I think the biggest selling point
Is the
was
privacy.
privacy.
and I was just about to say, I've
There's
noticed
a big hoarding on
Yeah.
Sheikh Zayed.
exactly the big billboard on
Yeah.
Sheikh Zayed Road actually promoting privacy on an Apple device.
So this is why, and this is because they've taken those extra steps, and that's where we say I think companies themselves are responsible, the ones that are collecting, to make sure that the consumer feels safe. And for me, knowing this, like from the back end as well, I'm like, well, this is a great way, so I can go onto a bunch of apps and be like, sign up with Apple, sign up with Apple, sign up with Apple, knowing that
I've been
Apple
signing up
will-
with Google.
Yeah, I
should
think
change
back
that.
to Roxy's point there. I think you've got to kind of educate yourself a bit, right? So I ask myself all the time, why does this company want my age, right? Why do you need to know my nationality? Why do you need to know my gender, right? Really, like ask that question, and I think the thing is you don't have to blindly put things in. Like obviously the airline needs to know your real birthday, but famously, like
Do they though?
Yeah, well, yeah, but like I mean,
They'll send you an incentive
exactly
every
no,
year.
because the problem is like when you're checking in and stuff like that, but other places, like genuinely, why? I mean, I've got 2 birthdays. I'll be honest. Like I don't put in my real birthday, right, on most things, and usually I'm Bolivian as a nationality, right? Because I'm like, why? Why do you need to know that? Like, what's so? And look, the other side of me, my other hat is give me all your data. I want everything. I want to track everything. So again, if you start to educate yourself and not blindly click OK and perhaps ask the question, well, why, if it's a government site, obviously, or you're filling an ESTA form for the US, you've got to make sure all of the information is correct. But if you're signing up for a flower shop, like really, like why? Why do you need to know, my birthday, right? Why do you
wanna
need
send
to
you
know my
a coupon
nationality?
on
Yeah,
your
great.
birthday.
No, I get it why, but that goes down to do you
Imagine
want
one
that?
random
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
You can
see
get
a-
that coupon on your fake birthday.
Exactly, yeah.
Like
Pay
one,
attention to those asterisks. I only fill
Yeah.
up those that are mandatory, and everything optional, I don't.
Yeah.
one fine day, Andrew's just got like random flowers in front of his house. It's like, wait, it's not my birthday.
What's my fake birthday?
Yeah, everything's connected to fake stuff. Yeah, no, and again, I think there is a difference between a brand that you want to communicate with and interact with, and I think there's a trust element associated to that as well. I mean, I trust Amazon implicitly with my data. I mean, and only for ease of use. Like anytime I buy something new, it arrives, oh, do you want to copy this from the other product? Yeah, please, just click a button, right? And I think that is that trade-off again, right? I trust Amazon implicitly because by giving them data, they actually provide additional value. So by me sharing, for example, I've got 4 Fire Sticks and a couple of Fire Tablets and a couple of Kindles, they'll connect those together and they'll say, okay, do you want to do this? They'll even tell me, hey, listen, man, it's just been delivered. Do you want us to set it up? Before I've even opened out of the box. So when there's additional value for, again, giving up information, right, that makes sense. But again, it goes back to education. Like, the biggest thing for me at the moment is probably, you know, I mean, I'm an old man, but like the younger guys now coming up, I mean, I've spoken to cousins of mine and they have open conversations on Twitter like we would on WhatsApp. And I'm like, why are you doing this? No one cares. They don't.
They're doing it for the followers.
But it's also almost like a very relaxed attitude, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Because everything is publicly shared now, right? So I think the younger as well that you are, the more, you know, you're just open from day one to publicly share everything. Right. And when you do that, again, I mean, TikTok famously got in trouble because, you know, even when they said, I don't want you to track me, a hacker, he found out that they basically set up a ping and you were pinging. So they were actually, you know, even though you said, I don't want to be tracked, they were still tracking you. So I think
but that's China.
It's China, yeah. I mean, look, TikTok now are selling their algorithm. Their algorithm's phenomenal. I mean, it's incredible. It's insane. But they're selling that now as tech. Right, we've learned enough about you, all of you guys, to now, you know, monetize that and sell it as tech. But I think, you know, I don't know. I feel like younger now, and our kids, like for those of us that have got kids, they're just, you know, completely kind of open. And it's more of that looking. I mean, you've probably done it yourself. Gone into schools, we've spoken to parents, you know, about the dangers, right, of sharing information and you know, online. And
it's a subject.
Yeah, people are blissfully unaware. Like parents are blissfully unaware. Like, you know, what do you mean? You know, what? It's crazy. But I think it's getting that right. That you know, now there's just you share everything, right?
Well, hopefully to the parents listening to this episode, we just gave them a little bit of education.
Scare, yeah.
I mean, for me, I love those, you know, parental. Every time there is a new gadget for my son, I look at and, you know, research about the parental control of that gadget, right? Because it's very important. You know, we don't want to deprive our kids of technology.
Do you tell them that you're able to view their history and whatever data you have access to?
What happens is that when we set it up, let's say I got him a PS5 over the weekend.
Well done. They're like gold dust.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we're setting up, he knows. You know, that there are certain parental control that needs to be set up. I explain it to him as well. But the good thing about being a parent in the UAE is that, you know, automatically there are certain negative keywords or exclusion lists that the government already has done on your behalf, right? So there's a lot of inappropriate content that you'll never browse in the UAE. So that's for me.
Make sure he doesn't get a VPN.
Yeah.
I mean,
What's that?
I mean, if he does, I think he's old enough by then.
Legal VPNs.
Yeah, you know, so that's very helpful. So it's all about, you mentioned about school, about safe communications. I'm glad that there are IT classes here, even in primary schools, that talks about, you know, PII, about social engineering, you know, all of these things. So kids are more knowledgeable. They'll be more knowledgeable than us. My son knows the multi-factor authentication, right? So, you know, it's you'll be surprised.
Data will be their future.
I mean, data is the future. I think the key when you're growing a community or a company as well is the education, that you educate your consumers and you tell them, hey, this is what we're doing with the data and this is why we're doing it. And I think that builds trust. And ultimately, if you've been doing that really well over years, your company is ultimately going to grow. And it's always a trust that, you know, like Andrew said, it's like Amazon, here you go.
Yeah.
Do you want to
like Letswork, in all honesty, you know, the reason they want to track your location is because they want to give you more advice to different places, right? So that makes sense, right? So most organizations are using data responsibly. Right. They're not taking things from you. I think one of the things on Apple that's interesting recently is the Bluetooth. So there's a whole host of your apps that wanted to access your Bluetooth, and it's like, okay, why? So I think it's now people are kind of getting to ask those questions, and I think going back to, you know, again, there is going to be, if you don't accept certain things, you just can't use this application, right? End of story. So, and I think that's what we're going to kind of move more into, where it's going to be the data, data police, as it were, is going to be the organization, you know. And if you want to play with us, you're going to have to go by our rules, right? That's it. We need to know when you're using the app, right? Because we're going to improve your user experience. But I think the thing is, most people Most people don't realize that you know, apps are being things like rage taps. You know, you can track rage taps to see if that button's working, and you need that information so you can improve the product, right? But most people won't look like that. What they'll do is they'll go on booking.com and go away and come back on another website and see Thailand and go, oh wow, I was just looking at Thailand. How do they know about that? That's where most people live, right?
They're watching.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the user journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a wonderful conversation today chatting with you all about data. I definitely know how to protect myself a little bit more, as well as, let's say, what type of companies to be more willing to give data to. So I'd like to thank you all for your time. It was wonderful having you on the show. And to all the listeners who've tuned in, if you'd like to listen to any more episodes by KEF Connect, you can go over to the website, kefholding.com. The episodes are also available on all the other popular streaming apps like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And tune into the next episode on NFTs and crypto. We'll see you all then.